Hi everyone, this is Tavinus here, welcoming you to another episode of Leadership Biz Cafe, brought to you by Tavinus Leadership, our leadership firm that now offers both virtual as well as in-person leadership keynotes and workshops on a variety of topics. To learn more about what we do and what we can offer to your organization, as well as to check out my award-winning leadership blog, visit our company's website at tavinusir.com. And with that, let's warm up the espresso machine and brew up another Leadership Espresso Shot. As I'm sure you can imagine, I read a lot of books to help me prepare for my interviews with my guests. Not to mention articles and studies I read to help me develop material for my talks and corporate training sessions, as well as for new articles I write for my leadership blog. As such, I like to make time to read about things outside of the field of leadership to give me a change of pace and scenery. While reading one of these casual reads in my reading pile, I read about one of these odd facts that make for good conversation starters when meeting new people. The item in question is a law in the city of Monza, Italy, that says it's illegal for people to keep goldfish in curved bowls. Now, the rationale behind this law is that curved bowls create a distorted view of what's outside the fishbowl, and that goldfish would suffer because of this distortion. Now, while this law can make for some interesting discussions around the dinner table, I also realize that it serves as a useful metaphor to evaluate your leadership, to better understand the impact your words and actions are really having on those you lead. In keynotes I give about my first book, Leadership Vertigo, I share how Leadership Vertigo refers to this gap that exists between how you view your leadership and how your employees experience your leadership. Now, under normal circumstances, this gap is something that every leader can manage and shrink to ensure real alignment between these two realities. However, as we are all aware, COVID-19 has made a substantial impact in the way we operate and will continue to do so for some time. And with the unplanned shift to relying more on virtual communication channels over in-person conversations with both our employees and our customers, leaders are being challenged and tested more than ever to be strong communicators who provide clarity both for the present and what's to come, as well as assurances that we can find a way to the other side. We've already seen how the COVID-19 pandemic has cast a harsh but necessary spotlight on social injustices which have gone unaddressed for far too long. To think that a similar harsh light will not be cast on the ongoing leadership issues from the past decade or so is in many ways a reflection of our willingness to swim within our own fishbowl, allowing those distortions to obscure the necessary effort and work that needs to be done if we are to help our organization do more than survive this pandemic, but thrive in that new reality when we finally bring a definitive end to this health crisis. Of course, as I've shared in my talks and corporate trainings around this concept of leadership vertigo, it's often hard for us to realize that we're swimming in our own version of a fishbowl. In fact, I've had many attendees come to me after my talk saying they wish they had brought their colleagues or even their boss along because they realize this is the problem they're having with them. That they are too focused on how they view their leadership that they fail to appreciate how their colleagues and employees experience working under their leadership. In many ways, these leaders are experiencing that very distortion those Italian lawmakers were concerned about exposing goldfish to. So how can you ensure that you're not leading from inside a fishbowl that distorts your perspective of not only what it's really like for people to work under your leadership, but what they really need from you to be successful in their efforts? Well, to help you start this process of gaining more clarity, awareness, and a better understanding of things, I'd like to share with you 4 questions, some of which I wrote in my book, as well as some that I share in some of my leadership keynotes that will help you with this process. The first question is, what am I really communicating to my employees? The second question, how does my emotional state impact the people around me and how I respond to them? The third question, what is it like to work with me? And finally, how am I helping my employees to do their best work? By asking yourself these 4 questions and honestly evaluating your response to them, you will get a better understanding and a clearer picture around your leadership of the things you need to continue doing and where you need to put more effort to help drive employee performance and results. In the end, as the leader of your team, it's important for you to recognize that while you may be certain of where you want to lead your team, it's not always easy to know what challenges your team is facing, let alone being able to truly understand the day-to-day realities your employees face. And as I point out in my book, Leadership Vertigo, there is often a gap between how you view your leadership and how your employees experience your leadership. Making time to reflect on these aspects of your leadership will ensure that you have a clearer sense of what really matters to your employees and what's really required for your organization to not just prevail, but to continue to thrive for years to come. To do otherwise will leave you leading from inside a fishbowl, where you end up with a distorted perspective of what's really going on and what's really needed for your organization and your employees to succeed and grow. And on that note, we come to the end of yet another Leadership Espresso Shot. So not only did you get an interesting tidbit that you could share with others as a conversation starter, but hopefully I've also given you something to think about in terms of how we can create these distortions about how we see and understand things, which can be wildly different from how those around us see and experience the same thing. It's these kinds of insights and observations that I'm happy to provide your organization through a leadership keynote or training workshop, either virtually or in person. We've been doing more virtual keynotes lately, and so if you'd like to learn more about my speaking work, please do drop me a line through our contact form at tanvirnasir.com. Now, if you've enjoyed this or previous episodes of my leadership podcast, I'd appreciate it if you could share it with your network. The easiest way to do this is to simply share a link to the podcast page at tanvirnasir.com/LBC. On our podcast page, you can listen to every episode of our show, as well as get links to subscribe to our podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, and Google Podcasts, so you can catch the latest episodes as soon as they're released. And with that, I'm Tanvir Nasir, and you've been listening to Leadership Biz Cafe.